out here with a review for The Awakening, starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor. Following the Fifth Doctor, Tegan and Turlough, the story begins with them travelling to a village in England called Little Hogcombe, where Tegan wants to visit her grandfather. They materialise whilst the village is having its special war games hosted by the local magistrate. However, someone else is interested in these war games, someone who is not exactly human, and soon the Doctor discovers an ancient evil underneath the crypts of the church. I must find a way to stop it before the war games turn into something more than just games. The acting all around is decent, nothing special, but at least tolerable. I'll get more into Peter Davison later when I talk about the script, because his particular Doctor plays a pretty important role in my final verdict on this story. As for the companions, well, Tegan is annoying as usual, though I'm pretty sure that Janet Fielding has been a good actress in other things. Here she, of course, as usual, is whiny, irritating and moany. Turlough is better, he's more subdued and calm, and you generally feel that he is a bit out of his element, especially considering his recent adventures with the Doctor. The local villagers are fairly typical English types. You have the local power-mad magistrate, played wonderfully by Dennis Lill. You have the more calm, more down-to-earth locals who are participating in the games, who are played averagely, nothing spectacular here. And of course you have, as with most stories that concern battles and such, you have the person who has no interest at all, which in this case is the local school teacher, and much like the villagers who are participating in the war games, there's nothing to write home about in this performance. She's caring and compassionate when she has to be, she's angry when she has to be. It's essentially a by-the-numbers performance. Now, the costumes of the war games, which in this case are based on the English Civil War, which was during the 1640s, do look pretty good, considering the budget the Doctor Who had to work with, and the Malice himself, the big monster, looks pretty good. I will go so far as to say it's probably one of the best designed monsters of 80s Doctor Who. And some people have said that it looks like something that could be a theme park attraction, but you know what, I think that's a good thing, because it shows the amount of work and artistry that went into it, and it does look like a genuinely cool monster, even though it doesn't do very much. But the image of that ugly face with green eyes bashing through the wall is something that I feel is not used as often in Doctor Who as it should be. So that whole, literally the monster breaking through, instead of just wandering around in a rubber suit. And the final thing to talk about, as always, is the script. Now, it should be no secret to any Who fan that this is very strongly influenced by the Jon Pertwee story, The Demons. And for those of you who don't know, the Demons was, as I said, a Jon Pertwee story from the early 70s that had the Doctor investigating paranormal events at a local village while there was an archaeological dig. And of course ran into the Master as usual, and in the process had to stop the resurrection of Azal, a beast from another world who was posing as the devil. And this script just has very strong, it feels like a redux of the Demons. I mean, if you swap the archaeological dig for the war games, Azal for the Malice, and the Magistrate played by Dennis Lill for the Master, you basically have a shorter version of the Demons. The only and some of you are saying, but surely that's a good thing. I mean, the Demons is considered a classic. But sadly, this is not the case for The Awakening. It's not that it's a horrendous script. It's certainly not Warriors of the Deep. It doesn't feel like I'm being treated like an idiot and that's shoving things down my throat, but it's just inappropriate. And I'm not saying inappropriate as in there's loads of violence and blood. I'm saying inappropriate as in it's not right for this particular Doctor. I'm going to say it now. I have never really cared for the Fifth Doctor. I always found him a bit bland. Don't get me wrong, Peter gives in a good performance, but there just isn't much to work with. And the thing is, when you think about the kind of things that the story has in it, as I said, the sort of the crypts, the ancient monsters, the sort of the supernatural elements, these feel like they belong in a Jon Pertwee story, or more specifically, the Tom Baker era, particularly the Hinchcliffe era, which was famous for stories like Pyramids of Mars and Talons of Weng Chiang. And the funny thing is, this was actually developed for that period. This was originally going to be a Tom Baker story for like season 14 or 15, but that never went through, and Eric Pringle, the writer, had to hold on to it for a whole decade before he could do anything with it. And it really does show, because this definitely feels like the kind of story you could imagine Tom Baker going down into the crypts and investigating. And it just doesn't work for the Fifth Doctor. The Fifth Doctor is more boyish. He's sort of more like a teen heartthrob. He isn't the sort of mad professor type character that John and Tom were, and as a result, it just doesn't gel. It never fully gels. He doesn't command the screen the way that John or Tom could. And the thing is, when you have stories like this, the important thing is for the Doctor to be just as commanding as the alien that he's fighting, and the thing is, that's not what happens here. Here, because Peter is essentially a much more vulnerable, more weak Doctor, he just doesn't have it. I just never fully buy it when he's confronting the Malice, that he could really hold his own against him. Again, not saying that Peter is a bad actor, just saying that he's the wrong Doctor. The Fifth Doctor just doesn't belong in these supernatural-esque stories. Heck, even with The Visitation, which is considered a classic, I often felt it was originally written for Tom, and it does still show. And the same thing here is the fact that the Fifth Doctor just isn't meant for supernatural type stories. He simply hasn't got the presence that you need to counterbalance that. He simply hasn't got the right character for these kinds of stories, and it hurts this story a lot, aside from Tegan's incessant nagging. Though, the plus side is that this is a two-parter, and it's 25 minutes each, so this story zips by in an hour. There's very little padding, very little exposition, and it gets to the point. So, that kind of leaves a tough decision. Should I just condemn this story for having the wrong Doctor? Or should I praise it for the fact that it doesn't suffer from the typical Doctor Who padding and doesn't spend time running around corridors and such? And that's tricky. But, alas, the length doesn't justify what happened. This is just a shameless rehash of the Demons, but it's just not as good. There are just things here that don't work. As I said, the Doctor is wrong, and it doesn't gel. It just doesn't quite feel right. It feels like this was a story for another Doctor, and it does show, as I've said, a lot of the time. So, in conclusion, I must give The Awakening a bronze TARDIS. The production values are good, the Malice is a cool monster, but unfortunately, average to mediocre performances and a story that just doesn't quite fit this particular Doctor are all negatives that do definitely hold this story down. If you are a Peter Davison enthusiast, you'll probably enjoy this story, but as for everyone else, I recommend just waiting for the Demons to come out on DVD, or go watch it online, because it is a far superior story to this.